Okay, hello. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Okay. So for those who don't know me, my name is Jacob Pitzenberger. Um, I was I've been involved with IPN for the past 8 or 9 years. Served on the board of directors for most of that time until I finally hit my term limit last summer. They thought they had gotten rid of me, but here I am. So full time, I manage a hunting and wildlife preserve just west of Des Moines, a little ways. Got about 2,200 acres that we manage primarily for native, just diverse native wildlife habitat. In my spare time, I also do a good deal of nature and wildlife photography. So today I'm going to just kind of share my journey in that world with you all, and hopefully give maybe a couple tips, pointers for any aspiring photographers in the audience. So I got my first camera right out of college, and it was the Canon Rebel T3. I'm going to throw out a few technical terms for any gear junkies out there, but I'll try to keep it to a minimum. Entry-level Canon camera. Rebel T3 came with the kit lens, the 18-55 and the 75-300. And I took it with me on my first job out of college down in the Grand River grasslands. I was working on a bird crew down there. And we were studying the effects of patchburn grazing on the nesting habits of grassland nesting birds, primarily the grasshopper sparrow. So it was a lot of long days of hiking through the prairies. We'd find a nest, we'd eventually capture the bird, band it, do all of our science, and then let it go. But we'd also take out video cameras with us and set the cameras up on the nests, and we were trying to capture any nest predators that might come along. And a fun side note, oh, thank you, much better. A fun side note, I believe that we were the first, and we kind of looked into some of the literature and stuff. I think we were the first to ever capture on video an instance of a white-tailed deer depredating a bird nest of actual nestlings, so not eggs, but baby birds. We had the deer coming in and eating the birds. So for any of you who think that deer are these cute, cuddly creatures, know that they're actually bloodthirsty, vicious beasts. You should never be trusted. So yeah, I'm in Southern Iowa, got my first camera, and these are kind of the photos that I'm taking, right? So this is a brown thrasher. It's out of focus, blurry, composition isn't great, right? I'm just learning how the camera works, what all the buttons do. There's a lot of numbers and symbols, and it can be intimidating for sure. Just getting started. Same here, Dick Sissel, out of focus, poor composition, not a great photo. So these are photos that I would classify as documentary photos for me. You know, photos I can go back and use for identification purposes, or if I wanted to start some kind of life list of everything I've photographed, something like that. So this is the first photo that I was kind of happy with, that I kind of liked, and it was mostly, I liked the lighting and the colors. I just thought it was pretty. The bird had a nice pose, and but there's a lot of problems with the photo too, right? So the bird is looking off to the right. It's sitting on the right side of the photo and looking off to the right. So that's, the composition's not great. It kind of leaves the viewer wondering, you know, what's this bird looking at? What's off to the right that I can't see? You know, and it also raises like the question of there's all this space on the left. Is that cedar in the background? Is that important? Does it matter? So yeah, again, just kind of learning how a camera functions down there. My second job was with the State Forest Nursery here in Ames. We were growing tree and shrub seedlings for conservation plantings. And again, just kind of keeping up with that documentary style photograph, learning how the camera works. These next few were taken with the 18-55 kit lens. So here I'm starting to play around, getting away from the fully auto settings on the camera, right? So learning what the shutter speed means, you know, what what's the ISO? How do all these things work? So playing more with the aperture and depth of field. So the photo on the right, you can see kind of that foreground, getting that in focus and letting it kind of drift off as you follow that leading line into the background, and getting some of that nice blur, playing with that depth of field. And kind of the opposite on the left, blurring the foreground, and then on the left there in the background, you have the action, the nice sunlight coming through the sprinklers. So playing around with different settings, trying to get off that kind of fully automatic mode, but still just kind of documenting what I'm seeing, not kind of going out of my way too far, right? My next job, I was a seasonal naturalist out at Springbrook State Park. So presenting programs for kids groups, everything from bird banding to wilderness survival and all that fun stuff. Still shooting the Rebel T3 here. These next few were taken with the 75 to 300. So Springbrook really offered a greater diversity of subjects to photograph, right? In kind of one of the basics in wildlife photography is really getting to know your subject, knowing their life history, knowing their habits. It's really going to help your photography progress much faster if you know how to find what you're looking for, right? So composition is getting a little better. So if we think back to that red-winged blackbird that was looking off to the right, here, when your subject is looking into the frame of the photo, it draws you into the photo more, right? It just makes more sense. It's more aesthetically kind of pleasing. And again, just a greater diversity to shoot out here. And playing with some more manual settings, playing around with the shutter speed, right? So that's what's going to allow you to capture things like birds in flight, kind of stop that motion rather than just having a red and white blur of a red-headed woodpecker across the frame, right? And that brings me to where I am currently. I manage Preserve Stonehaven. I've been there for almost 11 years now. So what I'm currently shooting is the Canon R5, and my main lens is the 600 f4 IS2, and then I have the 100 to 500 as my drive around kind of lens. I have a holster I built for my front seat, so I always have my camera ready. I can't stress that enough too, how many photos you can get if you just always have a camera with you. And then the 100 macro for flowers and crawly things, insects, all that fun stuff. Some species of note that we've had at Stonehaven. This was a short-eared owl. So this one, I was out mowing a fire break one day, and this huge bird just explodes up out of the grass right next to me, and kind of looped around and came back and landed 20 yards away, and it was short-eared owl. So I threw the tractor in high and got back to the shop and got my camera, and luckily it hung out long enough for me to come back and snap some photos of it. Mountain bluebird, this was a fun one that we actually got on the Great Backyard Bird Count last year. Hung out for a few weeks with us. Not one I ever expected to have on the farm list, for sure. This is a first summer common loon. We've got a 35-acre lake on the property, and every spring we get a handful of common loons that'll stop over. And this one was kind enough as I was photographing it to start calling for me. And if the song of or the call of a common loon doesn't just like shake you to your core, and I'm not sure you have a soul. I'm sorry. And this was probably the best day I've ever had at work ever. I pulled into the area where we have our feeders set up, and I looked up ahead and I thought, man, that bird looks a little different. So I got my camera out and started taking some photos, and it was a white-winged crossbill. I got out of my truck and kind of was hiding in the grass, taking some more shots, and And I know there's a lot of scientists here today, so I'm gonna try not to get like too wooey with you. But something inside me just said, put the camera down and just walk over there. So I put the camera on the ground and I stood up probably 20 yards and just walked over to the feeder, and the bird just kind of hung out there. And I reached in the feeder and got some seed. It started eating some seed out of my hand. And then it jumped down onto the ground and popped around right between my legs and around. And then it flew up onto my shoulder. And I'm like scrambling, trying to get my phone out to like take some pictures. Popped up onto my head and just hung out there for a while. But it didn't even poop on me. So yeah. So I made a new friend that day. Okay, so what am I? Am I a wildlife photographer and a nature photographer? You know, there's a million videos out there on YouTube and lectures and seminars on the basics of wildlife photography, camera settings and all that fun stuff. But I think the one thing that has really kind of driven my photography forward more than any was just asking this one question of why am I out here doing this? Why am I taking these photos? What does it mean? Is this just like a practice of, you know, like self-congratulation, trying to get something cool? But to me, it's really about conservation, right? Creating images that can have a mission, that can tell a story. I'd like to use my photos to educate people. If you can create an image so beautiful that someone doesn't have a choice but to stop, you know, to stop and really look at it, and once you have their attention, you might be able to teach them something, right? So here's a cool photo of a cool bird, right? I mean, so this is a merlin in the moon. And you can look at it and you know, you can just take that away from it, right? But it can tell stories too, right? You could use this photo to tell the story of the merlin and how it nearly suffered like the same fate of the bald eagle, you know, DDT nearly wiping it out as well. And you tell the story about how we just had the first nesting pair back in 2016 in 108 years in the state of Iowa. So there's a story of hope in there too. A bunch of people got together and decided DDT was pretty nasty stuff and we shouldn't use it anymore. And since then, their numbers have rebounded up over 1.5 million birds, right? So there's a couple stories you can tell with that. A couple stories you can tell with this photo. So again, a story I'm sure we all know the story, the plight of the bald eagle. DDT, it's listed endangered, but then it bounces back, right? Endangered to threatened to delisted in the 90s. So that's one story. But what's another story? So here's two eagles scavenging a deer. So you could tell the story of how you know, I don't know how that deer got there, but there's a good chance that it was shot with a lead slug, right? And ended up dead. And these eagles come along and scavenged on it. And you can tell the story of how over 60% of eagles admitted to rehab centers have lead in their blood, right? Here's another story of hope. Growing up in Iowa, I had no idea that we ever even had trumpeter swans here, right? Never seen one. Now I drive around in the winter and I've got groups of 6 or 8 or a dozen flying over my truck, and it's an amazing sight, right? So there's a few stories here. So someone could look at it and say, yeah, that's a pretty flower and a pretty butterfly. But when I look at it, I see the decades of reconstruction work that went into it, you know? Like none of this would exist if someone hadn't decided 20, 30 years ago that, hey, we should plant a prairie here and see what happens. And then there's the story of the monarch too, right? So I can't drive around a neighborhood in Des Moines without seeing a pollinator garden or native plants planted in a garden, largely thanks to the attention drawn to the need for pollinator habitat by the monarch butterfly. And a similar story here, that this was on a remnant prairie that we had found out at Stonehaven a few years ago, and we went in and cleared all the cedar trees, the Osage orange, threw a couple fires across it and tried to fight back the brome, and now it's just a carpet of natives, right? So this isn't just a photo of a bee on a flower. This is a remnant prairie, you know, thousands of years in the making. In this photo, I always like to share for a couple of reasons. This is my daughter and myself at a cabin up in northern Minnesota on the North Shore of Superior. And I share it for a couple of reasons. One, for any beginning photographers out there. So this photo, this is the only photo that I've had published by National Geographic. And this photo was taken with the least expensive gear I have ever owned, the Canon Rebel T3 and the kit lens. So you don't need a $10,000 lens and a $5,000 camera body to create an image that impacts people, that matters to people, right? You can do it with the cheapest stuff. You can do it with whatever you've got. And the other reason I share it is because it goes back to that question, the big why, right? This is my daughter, so this is the big why for me, and I'm sure for many of you. You know, we don't do this work for us, most of us. We do it for the next generation, so that they might be lucky enough to see the things that we get to see and to have the experiences that we get to have. So it reminds me a lot of so in college I took a number of poetry classes. And I remember on the first day of one of these classes, we all sat down and the instructor had us open our textbook, and he read the poem on that page, and it was titled Grocery List. And it went something like milk, eggs, bread, etc. And then he asked us, how many of you have made a grocery list? And we all raised our hands. And he said, well, what makes this one a poem? Why is this one in a textbook? And I had an answer, and I wish I would have raised my hand, but being wrong is scary, right? So I didn't, and I regret it. And it just bugs me to this day because I had the right answer, and I just didn't raise my hand. He said, what makes this a poem is intention. And that's it. It's all, it's the author went into it with the intent of writing the poem. And that stuck with me. And I try to put that kind of intention into every photograph I take, into every image that I'm creating, because I think that your intention matters. I think your motivations matter, and it's one of the reasons that I love this event so much, because I come here every year and I leave feeling so incredibly motivated and just ready to go out and do the work, because I'm here on a Saturday, spending my Saturday with 200-300 people who are here on their Saturdays, 200 or 300 people with the best of intentions, right? So I just wanted to thank you all for being here, and thank you for doing what you do, and for just being who you are. Thank you.